The first time my ex asked me to touch her again, she was lying face down on a beach towel with her bare back turned toward me. Then she reached behind herself, untied her navy bikini top, and said, "Put sunscreen on my back like you used to." There are moments when a man's entire emotional history returns through one sentence. That was mine. My name is Grant Mercer. I was 26 that summer, working as an audio engineer in Raleigh and pretending I had fully recovered from the breakup that had rearranged my apartment, my weekends, and roughly half my personality. Sophie Bennett had been my girlfriend for 2 years. She had been my ex for 7 months. And until that Saturday on the North Carolina coast, we hadn't been alone together since the night she packed the last of her things. We were both at the beach because our friends Daniel and Brooke had rented a house in Corolla to celebrate their engagement. Brooke had promised me the weekend would be low pressure, which was an interesting phrase to use when trapping two exes under one roof with 6 mutual friends and a single coffee machine. I'd arrived Friday evening. Sophie came an hour later wearing denim shorts, a white linen shirt over her swimsuit, and the careful smile people use when they've rehearsed, looking unaffected. "Hi, Grant." "Hi, Sophie." That was it. No hug, no handshake, not even one of those awkward half waves that makes adults look like nervous children in a school play. But at breakfast the next morning, she slid the sugar bowl toward me before I asked. I still took 2 spoonfuls, she still remembered. Little habits are cruel that way. By noon, everyone had carried chairs, coolers, towels, and enough snacks to survive a minor maritime disaster down to the beach. The day was bright and windy, with waves breaking hard enough to drown out any conversation you didn't want to have. I volunteered to help Daniel get ice from the house. When we returned, Brooke announced that the women wanted frozen drinks from the beach bar half a mile down. "Come on," Daniel said. I looked at the chairs. Someone should stay with the stuff. Daniel's eyes moved from me to Sophie, who was stretched out on her towel reading a paperback. The man had been my friend since college. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Sophie's staying," he said. She lowered her sunglasses. "Apparently I am." Brooke smiled with all the innocence of a woman arranging an ambush. "Perfect." 2 minutes later, they were walking away together while Sophie and I remained beside a cooler, 8 empty chairs, and a silence big enough to have its own tide schedule. I sat under the umbrella and opened a book I had no hope of reading. Sophie turned a page. "You've been staring at the same paragraph for 5 minutes. I'm absorbing it deeply. You're holding it upside down." I looked at the cover. She laughed before she could stop herself. It wasn't a polite laugh, it was the real one, warm, slightly breathless, and followed by the little crease beside her left eye that had always made me want to kiss her there. My chest tightened with an emotion I had spent 7 months renaming. Nostalgia, regret, poor judgment, anything but love. "You seem well," I said. That sounded almost disappointed. "I'm devastated. I was hoping Seattle had ruined you." "It tried. Too much expensive coffee and not enough decent barbecue." "You used to say barbecue is just meat with confidence." "I was young and foolish." "You said it last year." As I said. We smiled at each other, and for a few seconds the breakup stopped sitting between us. That was always the dangerous thing about Sophie. Being around her felt natural before it felt wise. She was a landscape architect who could spend 40 minutes explaining why a public bench had been placed at the wrong angle, then forget where she'd left her own car. She argued with confidence, apologized without theatrics, and had once driven across town at midnight because I'd mentioned over the phone that I was sick and out of soup. I hadn't fallen for her because she needed me. I'd fallen because she noticed things, because she made ordinary places feel chosen, because when I spoke, she listened as if there might be something beneath the words worth waiting for. 7 months earlier, she'd accepted a temporary position with a design firm in Seattle. At the same time, my father needed surgery and months of help afterward. I couldn't move. She couldn't turn down the best opportunity of her career. Neither of us betrayed the other. Neither of us became the villain. We simply reached a future that couldn't fit both of us and called the breakup mature. Mature breakups, I had discovered, still hurt like hell. Sophie closed her book and reached for the sunscreen beside her bag. She applied it to her arms, then glanced toward the water. Would you mind helping me? I assumed she meant the stubborn cap. Then she rolled onto her stomach, settling face down on the towel with her back turned up toward the sun. She swept her dark hair over one shoulder and reached behind herself. Her fingers loosened the knot of her bikini top. I stared very hard at the horizon. Sophie. What? You can't just do that? Untie a string? You know that isn't what I mean. She rested her cheek against her folded arms. I can't reach the middle of my back. There are spray bottles for this exact situation. I bought lotion. Of course you did. You always said the spray missed spots. I had said that. Usually while kneeling beside her on some other beach, back when touching her required no negotiation. She held the bottle over her shoulder. Put sunscreen on my back, she said, softer now. Like you used to. I could have refused. Maybe I should have. Instead, I took the bottle and moved onto the edge of her towel. Tell me if this feels strange, I said. It already feels strange. That's encouraging. I poured lotion into my palm, rubbed my hands together, and placed them carefully against her shoulders. Sophie went still. So did I. Her skin was warm from the sun. I worked slowly, keeping my touch practical, even while every nerve in my hands remembered her. The curve of her shoulder blades, the faint freckle near her right side, the way she exhaled when I smoothed lotion down the center of her back. You missed a spot, she murmured. I'm not finished. You always got defensive about sunscreen. I take skincare seriously. You once used dish soap as shampoo. That was an emergency. That was a Tuesday. I laughed and some of the tension loosened. But not all of it. My hand reached her lower back, then stopped at the safe edge of her bikini. She turned her face slightly, enough that I could see one eye behind her sunglasses. You're being very careful, she said. You're my ex. I'm aware. And your top is untied. I'm also aware of that. The wind lifted a strand of her hair across my wrist. Neither of us moved to brush it away. Sophie, I said quietly, why did you ask me? Her teasing expression faded. Around us, children shouted near the water. A gull landed beside the cooler and considered stealing a bag of chips. The whole beach carried on as if my hand weren't resting against the woman I had once planned my life around. Because I knew you'd be careful, she said. That's not the whole answer. No. I withdrew my hand and set the sunscreen beside her towel. Then give me the whole answer. She didn't retie her top immediately. Instead, she stayed where she was, face down, looking toward me as if it was easier to be honest when she didn't have to fully meet my eyes. When we broke up, she said, you told me you didn't want me to give up Seattle for you. I didn't. I know, you were very noble about it. That doesn't sound like a compliment. It isn't. She swallowed. You told me to go. You helped me pack. You drove me to the airport, and not once, Grant, did you ask if there was another option? I sat back on my heels. You'd already accepted the job. Because you never asked me to stay. I couldn't ask you to throw away your career while my father needed me here. And I couldn't ask you to abandon your family. Her voice tightened. So we both protected each other from having to make a choice. That was the mature thing? Was it? The question landed harder than anger would have. Sophie pushed herself up just enough to retie the strings behind her neck, then sat facing me. Her sunglasses came off. Her brown eyes were bright, but she didn't look away. I didn't ask you to put sunscreen on me because I forgot what your hands felt like, she said. My pulse kicked. Then why? Because I wanted to know if you still touched me like you loved me. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in the sand between us. A message from Daniel lit the screen. Don't let her leave without telling you why she moved back. I read it twice. Then I looked at Sophie. The color had drained from her face. You moved back? I asked. She glanced toward our friends in the distance, then back at me. 3 weeks ago, she said. And you didn't tell me. I was going to. When? Her gaze dropped briefly to my hand, the one that still smelled like her sunscreen. After I found out whether you'd already stopped loving me, I looked from Daniel's message to Sophie. You moved back 3 weeks ago? Yes. To Raleigh? Durham? That's 30 minutes from my apartment. 24 without traffic. I stared at her. She winced. I may have checked. That should have pleased me. Instead, 7 months of unanswered questions crowded into the space between us. Why didn't you call? Because I didn't know what I was allowed to want. You could have started with coffee. I started with deleting your number, restoring it from the cloud, and staring at it every night. That's less efficient than coffee. I was going through something. Despite myself, I almost smiled. Sophie saw it. Her shoulders eased, but only slightly. I picked up the sunscreen and turned it in my hands. Did you move back because of me? No. Her answer came quickly, then she added, but you were part of why coming back felt like coming home. It wasn't the sweeping confession some wounded part of me wanted. It was better. It was honest. Her position in Seattle had always been an 18-month contract, with the possibility of becoming permanent. When the firm offered to extend it, she declined. She'd accepted a position designing parks and public spaces for a smaller firm in Durham. I missed my family, she said. I missed Brooke. I missed thunderstorms that didn't last 9 months. And barbecue? That too. And me? She held my gaze. Every day. The words struck so directly that I forgot how to respond. She drew her knees toward her chest. Now you say something. I'm trying not to say the wrong thing. You always do that. Do what? Treat feelings like a sound mix, lower the messy parts, remove the background noise, make everything clean enough for someone else to hear. My work is being used against me. I'm serious, Grant. I know. She leaned closer, her voice dropping beneath the rush of the surf. I don't want your polished answer. I want the answer you would have given if you weren't trying to protect me. I looked toward the shoreline. Our friends were still distant figures near the beach bar, in no apparent hurry to rescue us. 7 months earlier, I had watched Sophie walk through airport security carrying a green backpack and a future that did not include me. She had turned around once. I had smiled and lifted my hand. Then I'd made it all the way to the parking garage before I broke down. I wanted to ask you to stay, I said. Her lips parted. I wanted to tell you that I hated Seattle. I'd never even been there, but I hated the rain, the distance, and every person who would get to see you while I didn't. I wanted to ask you to choose me. Why didn't you? Because if you had stayed, I would have wondered whether you resented me. And if you still left, I would have known your answer. Sophie's eyes filled. So I made it for you, I continued. I decided that loving you meant making it easy for you to leave. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away with an annoyed swipe. You made it look very easy, she whispered. It wasn't. I waited at the gate until they called my group 3 times. I closed my eyes briefly. I kept thinking you'd call, she said. That you'd say we'd try long distance, or you'd visit, or you'd ask me to come back when the contract ended. Anything. I wrote you a message before your flight took off. What did it say? Come home. Her breath caught. I deleted it, I admitted. That was stupid. Extremely. I hate that you did that. So do I. She shifted closer on the towel until our knees touched. It was barely contact, but neither of us moved away. Did you date anyone? She asked. One woman, twice. Sophie's eyebrows lifted. Twice? The first date was fine. On the second, she asked why I kept checking the door. Were you expecting someone? You. Her expression softened. What about you? I asked. A coworker took me to dinner. How many times? Once. Was he handsome? Obnoxiously. I dislike him. He spent 20 minutes explaining urban green space to me after I told him what I did for a living. I hate him. That brought back her real laugh. I wanted to touch her face. The desire rose so naturally that my hand almost moved before I stopped it. Sophie noticed. You can, she said. Can what? Whatever you just decided not to do. The wind blew another strand of hair across her cheek. This time I lifted my hand and tucked it behind her ear. My fingertips lingered along her jaw. Her eyes closed for half a second. It was such a small touch. I had held her through fevers, carried her half asleep from the couch, kissed every inch of her face while she complained that she was trying to read. But after 7 months, touching her cheek felt more intimate than all of it. When she opened her eyes, I saw the same longing that had kept me awake in an empty apartment. I leaned in. So did she. Then shouting rose from the water. Grant! Daniel waved both arms while balancing a cardboard tray of frozen drinks. Help! Sophie and I stopped with less than an inch between us. Daniel stumbled dramatically through the sand. I considered letting him perish. Sophie pressed her lips together, fighting a smile. You should probably save the daiquiris. They interrupted a significant moment. They don't know that. They absolutely know that. I stood and offered her my hand. She looked at it, then laced her fingers through mine. The gesture was deliberate, not an accident, not nostalgia, a choice. I pulled her to her feet and she remained close enough that the front of her shoulder brushed my chest. This doesn't fix everything, she said. I know. I'm still angry. I know that too. And I don't want us to fall back into the same relationship just because it feels familiar. Neither do I. Her thumb moved once across my knuckle. But I do want to see what this is now, she said. The hope in her voice scared me more than the breakup had, because now I knew exactly how much losing her cost. I want that too. Daniel reached us and shoved 2 drinks into my free hand. His gaze dropped conspicuously to our joined hands. Oh, he said, progress. Brooke elbowed him. Sophie released me, but not before giving my hand one last squeeze. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange, electric normalcy. We played beach volleyball. Sophie accused me of serving directly at her. You're the weakest link, I said. I played varsity. Your school must have been very supportive. She launched the ball at my head. Later, we sat with the others near the water. Our shoulders touched. Once, when Brooke said something funny, Sophie laughed and leaned against me without thinking. Neither of us acknowledged it. Neither of us shifted away. By sunset, everyone returned to the house to shower and argue over dinner. I stayed behind to fold chairs. Sophie helped, though she carried exactly 1 towel while claiming to supervise. You're excellent at delegation, I told her. It's a leadership skill. You left 3 chairs. I believe in you. We began walking back along the beach. The sky had turned lavender and gold, and the crowded shoreline had emptied to a few couples and families packing their things. It felt suspiciously like a date. Sophie walked barefoot beside me, holding her sandals in one hand. Her other hand swung near mine, occasionally brushing my fingers. On the 3rd brush, I caught her hand. She looked up. Was that allowed? I asked. I was beginning to think you'd never do it. We walked another 100 yards like that. I'm free tomorrow, she said. We're all here tomorrow. I meant after we leave. I glanced at her. Are you asking me out? I'm inviting you to see my new apartment. That sounds dangerously familiar. You've never been to this one. True. I have furniture that requires assembly. And there it is, manual labor. I'll buy dinner. What kind? Barbecue. I pretended to consider it. Fine, but only because you've demonstrated personal growth. She smiled, then went quiet. What? I asked. There's something else I need to tell you before tomorrow. My grip on her hand tightened. Is it bad? No, but you may not like it. Sophie, She stopped walking. The light had faded enough that I could barely see the nervousness in her expression. My firm offered me the Durham job 4 months ago, she said. I frowned. You said you moved back 3 weeks ago. I did. But you knew you were coming back 4 months ago? Yes. 4 months. She'd known for nearly half the time we'd been apart. Why wait until now to tell me? Because before I came home, I needed to know whether we had any chance of doing this differently. What does that mean? She let go of my hand, opened the small pocket of her beach bag, and pulled out a folded envelope softened by travel. My name was written across the front in her handwriting. I wrote this the night I accepted the job, she said. I carried it with me from Seattle. I reached for it, but she held on. What's in it? The question I was too afraid to ask you in person. And now I'm asking. She released the envelope. Inside was a single page. I unfolded it beneath the last light of the sunset and read the first line. Grant, if I come home, will you finally ask me to stay? I read the letter twice. It wasn't long. Sophie had never needed many words to tell the truth. Grant, if I come home, will you finally ask me to stay? Not because Seattle defeated me, it didn't. I did good work here, made friends, and learned I can build a life anywhere. But the life I want is near the people I love. You're one of them. You're still the one I love most. I don't want our old relationship back. I want the chance to build a better one. One where neither of us confuses silence with sacrifice. If you don't want that, I'll accept it. But this time, please let me hear you choose. Sophie. I lowered the page. She stood in front of me with the wind pulling at her hair, her arms folded, as if she were bracing for impact. When you wrote this, did you expect me to answer? I asked. I hoped you would. You carried it for 4 months. I plan to mail it. What stopped you? Fear, pride. Brooke saying a letter was romantic. Daniel saying it sounded like something a serial killer would send. That tracks. She smiled nervously. Then I kept thinking I should give it to you in person. Why tonight? Because you finally said you wanted me to stay. No, I said I'd wanted to ask you 7 months ago. Her smile disappeared. I folded the letter carefully along its original crease and slipped it back into the envelope. You're right, I said. That isn't the same thing. Sophie nodded once, but her eyes dropped. I stepped closer. Stay. Her gaze snapped back to mine. Stay in Durham. Stay close enough to argue about barbecue and criticize my furniture. Stay long enough for us to learn how to say the frightening things before they become goodbye. Her lips parted. I took her hand. I'm not asking you to give anything up, I continued. I'm asking you to choose this with me, and I'm choosing it too. Grant, I love you. The words left me without polish or protection. I never stopped. I tried being reasonable about it. I tried being grateful for what we had. I tried dating someone who probably still thinks I have a compulsive interest in restaurant doors. A laugh broke through Sophie's tears. But I love you, I said again. And if we're going to make a new mistake, I'd rather make it together. That was almost beautiful. Almost? The mistake part needs work. I didn't rehearse. I can tell. Then she caught the front of my shirt and kissed me. For one stunned second, I forgot to breathe. After 7 months of imagining this, I expected the kiss to feel familiar. Instead, it felt like finding a door in a house I thought I knew. Her mouth was warm and salt-sweet from the beach. My hands found her waist, pulling her closer as she rose onto her toes. The kiss deepened, carrying all the things we had refused to say at the airport. All the calls we hadn't made, all the nights we'd slept alone because we believed suffering quietly was a form of love. When we finally separated, she rested her forehead against mine. I love you too, she whispered. I closed my eyes. Hearing it didn't erase the months apart, it made them worth surviving. We should go back, she said after a moment. Probably. Everyone will be waiting. They can continue. She smiled against my mouth. One more? I kissed her again because she asked and because choosing her suddenly felt like the easiest honesty in the world. At the beach house, our friends attempted subtlety. Brooke took one look at Sophie's face and hugged her. Daniel looked at mine and said, "Finally." "No one asked you," I told him. "You're welcome." "For leaving us alone?" "For the text." Sophie pointed at him. "You had no right to tell him I moved back." "I didn't tell him. I strongly suggested you should. That's telling with extra steps." Dinner became an interrogation disguised as grilled shrimp. Sophie and I refused to provide details, though her knee stayed pressed against mine beneath the table. Later, when everyone gathered for a movie, she curled beside me on the couch. It wasn't dramatic. She simply rested her head against my shoulder and took my hand beneath the blanket. But I felt the significance of it. For months, I had trained myself not to reach for her. Now she was reaching for me. The next afternoon, after the beach house emptied, I followed her car to Durham. Sophie's new apartment occupied the top floor of a renovated brick warehouse. It had tall windows, wood floors, and enough unopened boxes to suggest she'd been waiting for someone before making it home. "You've lived here 3 weeks," I said. "I've been busy." "You own one fork." "I had two, but one's missing." "How do you lose a fork?" "Seattle changed me." The furniture requiring assembly turned out to be a dining table, 2 bookshelves, and a bed frame. "You lured me here under false pretenses." "I promised dinner." "You implied one piece of furniture." "I allowed you to make assumptions." She handed me a screwdriver. For 2 hours, we assembled the table incorrectly, disassembled it, blamed the instructions, and finally succeeded through a combination of stubbornness and online videos. When we set it upright, Sophie ran her palm over the surface. "Our first table was terrible," she said. "It came from the curb. You said it was vintage. It was old. It leaned. It had character." She looked around the apartment. "This one doesn't have any yet." "It will." The words came out more intimate than I intended. Her eyes met mine. "We'll spill wine on it," I added. "You'll leave work samples everywhere. I'll put my keys in the wrong place and accuse you of moving them. You're giving my table quite a future." "I'm optimistic." Sophie crossed the space between us and slipped her arms around my neck. "Are you giving us one?" "Yes." "Good answer." She kissed me slowly without the urgency of the beach. This kiss wasn't about recovering what we'd lost. It was about testing what remained. My hand settled at her hips. Her fingers moved into my hair, and every thought I had became less useful. Then my phone vibrated on the new table. I ignored it. It vibrated again. Sophie drew back. "You should check." "It's probably Daniel demanding gratitude." "Check." I pulled out my phone. The screen showed an email notification from Westline Studios. Sophie read the subject before I could turn it away. "Final offer. Response required Monday." Her arms loosened around my neck. "What offer?" I set the phone down. This was the moment when the old version of me would have minimized, delayed, or decided what she needed to know. I didn't want to be him anymore. "A senior engineering position in Nashville," I said. "They contacted me 2 months ago." Sophie stepped back. "You applied for a job in Nashville?" "No, they recruited me after hearing an album I mixed." "Is it a good job?" "It's the kind I used to say I wanted." Her expression changed, not to anger but to recognition. "And you have to answer tomorrow." "Yes." "Were you going to tell me?" "I'm telling you now." "After asking me to stay." "I didn't know you were back when they made the offer." "But you knew before this weekend." "I did." She walked to the window and looked down at the street. I hated the distance of those few feet. "I haven't accepted it," I said. "Do you want to?" "I don't know." She turned. "That's not an answer." "It's the honest one." Sophie folded her arms. "Then let's be honest all the way. If I hadn't come back, would you take it?" "Yes." The word hurt her. I saw it. She nodded slowly. And now? Now there's an us to consider. No. Her voice sharpened. Don't do that. Do what? Make me the reason you give something up, then spend years pretending you didn't. That isn't what I said. It's what we're both thinking. I moved toward her, but she lifted a hand. Not to reject me, to make me stop long enough to listen. We promised not to protect each other with silence, she said. So don't tell me what the right choice is. Tell me what you actually want. I looked at her new apartment, our half-open dinner containers, and the table we had built together. Then at the email waiting on my phone. I want both. So did I, she said quietly. 7 months ago. The truth of it settled between us. This wasn't our old problem returning, it was our first chance to solve it differently. Sophie picked up my phone and held it out to me. Call them. I didn't take it. Why? Because before we decide what happens to us, you need to find out exactly what you'd be saying yes to. And if it's everything I wanted? Her eyes held mine. Then this time, she said, we make the choice together. I took the phone. Not because I wanted to call Westline Studios on a Sunday evening, but because Sophie was right. We had spent 7 months grieving a decision neither of us had actually discussed. I wasn't going to repeat that mistake beside a table we had already assembled twice. The hiring director answered on the 4th ring. Grant, Rebecca said. I was starting to think you'd disappeared. Sorry, family weekend. Sophie sat across from me, close enough to hear my side of the conversation. I asked every question I had avoided because asking them would make the offer real. The position paid more than I earned in Raleigh. Much more. I would oversee a team of engineers, work with major label artists, and have access to studios I had admired since college. But it required relocating within 60 days. Most sessions ran late. Some involved weeks of travel. Rebecca described 80-hour weeks as part of the culture in a tone suggesting I should be honored to lose sleep. We need someone who can make Westline the center of their life, she said. I looked at Sophie. She didn't react. She wasn't trying to influence me. That made her presence matter even more. Can I have until noon tomorrow? I asked. 10 o'clock. We have another candidate waiting. After the call ended, silence filled the apartment. Sophie opened the takeout containers and divided cold barbecue between 2 paper plates. You're feeding me now? You make bad decisions when you're hungry. Name one. You once bought a motorcycle online. It was affordable. It didn't have an engine. That was not clear in the photographs. She handed me a plate. Eat. We sat on the floor with our backs against her new sofa because the dining chairs remained in boxes. For a while, neither of us mentioned Nashville. It was strangely comforting. We could be facing the exact problem that had ended us and still debate whether coleslaw belonged on a sandwich. It did. Sophie remained wrong. When we finished, she set her plate aside. What did you think? She asked. It's an incredible opportunity. I heard. The pay would change things. Yes. And I'd get to work with people I've admired for years. She nodded. But? But I didn't like the way she described the hours. You used to work all night. I used to be 22 and think exhaustion proved I was important. You also used dish soap as shampoo. I trusted you with that information. She smiled, but her eyes remained serious. If they'd offered this 2 years ago, would you have taken it? Immediately. What changed? I looked at my hands. My father getting sick, for one. His surgery had been successful. After months of rehab, he was back to gardening, driving, and refusing to follow any medical advice that inconvenienced him. But helping him had changed the scale of my ambitions. The awards and albums I'd once imagined mattered. They simply weren't the only things that mattered. I watched my dad spend 6 months learning to walk without pain, I said. Every time I visited, he asked about your work before he asked about mine. He likes me better. He likes everyone better. That isn't true. It's mostly true. Sophie nudged my foot with hers. I kept telling myself I'd leave Raleigh once he recovered. I continued that Nashville was the next obvious step. Then the offer came and I didn't feel excited. I felt like I was supposed to feel excited. That's different. Very. She drew one knee up and wrapped her arms around it. I need you to know I would try. Try what? Long distance, weekends, video calls, whatever we decided. Her voice wavered. I wouldn't like it, but I won't let fear make the decision for us again. I reached across the space between us and took her hand. You'd do that? For you? Yes. For the record, you're terrible on video calls. You always called when I was eating. You chew like you're angry at food. I usually am. I threaded my fingers through hers. I would try too. She studied my face. But I don't want to build a relationship out of departure lounges if the job on the other side isn't a life I want. A tear gathered in the corner of her eye. You're not allowed to turn it down just because I cried, she said. I know. Or because I moved back. I know. Or because you think choosing me requires proving something dramatic. I know, Sophie. She pulled her hand away. For one alarming second, I thought she was upset. Then she moved onto her knees and crossed the space between us, settling in my lap with her arms around my neck. I held her waist. You're very controlling about my career, I said. I'm protecting future Sophie from resentful Grant. Future Grant is offended. Future Grant has terrible communication skills. He's working on them. She touched her forehead to mine. What life do you want? No one had asked me that so plainly. Not what job, not what salary, not what title, what life. I want work I'm proud of, I said. I want time to help my dad with the garden even though he'll criticize everything I do. I want friends who interfere too much. They'll be thrilled. I want to open my own small studio someday. Her fingers moved gently through the hair at the back of my neck. And, she prompted, I want mornings with you. Her eyes softened. Not just vacations and planned weekends, I said. I want your shoes where I trip over them. I want to hear you complain about benches. I want to make coffee while you steal half of it. I don't steal it, you make extra. Because you steal it. She kissed the corner of my mouth. I want all of you, I said. Not instead of a career. As part of my life. Sophie kissed me fully. There was no desperation in it this time. No need to recover 7 lost months in a single breath. Her hands framed my face. Mine slid around her back, holding her close, while the last daylight disappeared from the windows. When she drew away, her lips stayed near mine. Stay tonight, she said. The request was quiet but certain. Are you sure? I don't want to rush because I'm afraid you'll leave. But I also don't want to keep pretending I don't know what I want. And what do you want? You. Here, tonight. I kissed her again. Later, we lay beneath a blanket on the mattress we had finally managed to place on its frame. Her head rested on my chest, and her fingers traced slow circles over my hand. The apartment was still unfamiliar. Streetlight came through uncurtained windows. Half the room remained packed in boxes, but with Sophie beside me, it felt more like home than my own apartment had in months. I'm scared, she whispered. About Nashville? About us. I tightened my arm around her. Me too. What if love isn't enough? It wasn't last time. She lifted her head. I brushed her hair from her face. Love didn't teach us how to talk. It didn't make the timing fair. It didn't solve anything by itself. That isn't reassuring. I'm not finished. Sorry. It's enough to make me want to learn. Her expression softened. We don't have to promise never to hurt each other, I said. We promise not to make each other guess. No guessing, she agreed. No noble silence. No deleting important messages. That feels targeted. It is. I kissed her forehead and she tucked herself closer against me. By the time I woke, sunlight covered the floor. Sophie stood in the kitchen wearing my shirt and examining the coffee machine like it had personally insulted her. "You're up early," I said. "It's 9:15. I sat upright. Westline's deadline was at 10. My phone rested on the nightstand. There were 2 emails and a voicemail from Rebecca. Sophie handed me coffee. "I won't ask what you decided." "Why not?" "Because I don't want you to look at my face while you decide." I caught her wrist before she could turn away. "I decided it last night." Her breath stopped. I called Rebecca. Sophie remained beside the bed, my hand wrapped around hers. "Thank you for the offer," I said when Rebecca answered, "but I'm going to decline." Rebecca tried twice to change my mind. She offered more money, a later relocation date, and the possibility of reviewing my schedule after the first year. I still said no. When the call ended, Sophie sat beside me. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Did you just choose me over Nashville?" "No." Pain flickered across her face. I raised her hand to my mouth and kissed her knuckles. "I chose the life I want," I said. "You're the best part of it." She exhaled, and then she kissed me hard enough to spill my coffee onto the floor. "That was dangerous," I murmured. "You seemed too pleased with yourself." "I just turned down a prestigious job." "You're unemployed now?" "I still have my current job." "Then your sacrifice lacks drama." I pulled her back onto the bed. For the next hour, Nashville stopped existing. Near noon, while we cleaned coffee from the floor, my phone rang again. I expected Rebecca. Instead, it was my boss in Raleigh. "Grant," he said, "Westline just called asking for a reference." I frowned. I already turned them down. "I know, that's why their next question was interesting." Sophie watched my expression. "What did they ask?" I said. My boss laughed. "They wanted to know whether you'd ever considered opening a satellite studio in North Carolina." "A satellite studio?" I repeated. "That's what they said," my boss replied. "Apparently Westline has been considering expansion into the Triangle. They liked your work, and turning them down made someone curious about what would keep you here." My eyes moved to Sophie. She shook her head immediately and mouthed, "Don't answer yet." I almost laughed. "What exactly are they proposing?" I asked. "They haven't proposed anything. They want a meeting." "Then tell them I'll meet." After I hung up, Sophie took the coffee mug from my hand and set it safely beyond kissing distance. "You're smiling," she said. "I'm intrigued." "Good." "I thought you might be worried." "I am. But worry doesn't get to make our decisions anymore." "Our decisions?" She hesitated. "You know what I mean." "I'm not sure I do." Her eyes narrowed. "Grant, we've kissed. We spent the night together. We've discussed long-distance schedules and possible career resentment. But at no point have we established what we are. You're choosing now to be technical? I'm an engineer. An audio engineer. Precision matters." Sophie folded her arms, though the corners of her mouth were turning upward. "Fine. What are we?" I stood and took both her hands. "This is going to sound ridiculous considering our history. Most things you say do. Sophie Bennett, would you be my girlfriend?" Her smile vanished. For a second, I worried I had misjudged the moment. Then tears gathered in her eyes. "I'm trying to be romantic," I said. "Crying feels like mixed feedback. You're asking me to be your girlfriend while I'm wearing your shirt and we're standing beside a coffee stain. I can kneel, but that might create the wrong expectation." She laughed and pulled me toward her. "Yes," she said against my mouth. "I'll be your girlfriend." I kissed her. This was not the desperate kiss on the beach or the uncertain kiss beside her new table. It was a beginning. When we separated, she rested her hands against my chest. "I have conditions," she said. "Of course you do. We say when we're afraid." All right, we don't make sacrifices the other person didn't ask for. Agreed. And if you take this studio opportunity, you don't get to claim it happened because you turned down Nashville for me. I won't. You also need to admit I was right about calling them. You told me to call about the Nashville job, not a satellite studio. Still counts. It absolutely does not. She kissed me again. I conceded the point. The meeting with Westline happened 2 weeks later. I went armed with questions, boundaries, and the knowledge that no job title was valuable enough to consume my entire life. Their plan was still preliminary, but they wanted someone local to help develop it. The role involved 6 months of consulting while I kept my current position. If the studio moved forward, I could become its director and minority partner. There would be travel to Nashville, but days at a time rather than a permanent move. I would help choose the building, recruit the team, and establish the schedule. It was close to the dream I had carried in college. The difference was that this version left room for a life. I didn't accept at the first meeting. Sophie didn't tell me to. We sat at her dining table that evening with contracts, calendars, and barbecue between us. She asked what excited me, what frightened me, and what I would regret. I asked what my travel would mean for her. She admitted she hated the idea of empty weekends, but could handle them if we planned together. For once, love wasn't a reason to avoid the difficult conversation. It was the reason we stayed at the table. I accepted the consulting role the following morning. Then Sophie made me take her on a proper first date. Yesterday didn't count? I asked. Yesterday involved legal documents. The restaurant has tablecloths. So do courtrooms. I picked her up Friday night with flowers and took her to a small Italian restaurant where we had gone for our third date years earlier. The host seated us at the same corner table. Sophie looked around. Did you arrange this? I asked. You planned something? I plan things. You once forgot your own birthday dinner. It wasn't a significant birthday. It was 25. At the end of the meal, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. I don't want to pretend we're starting from nothing, she said. We aren't. But I also don't want to skip the good parts of starting again. What are the good parts? Dates, flirting, wondering whether you'll kiss me at the door. I can answer that last one now. Don't. I enjoy suspense. Outside her apartment, I walked her upstairs and stopped in the hall. She leaned against the door, waiting. Thank you for dinner, she said with exaggerated formality. I had a pleasant time. Pleasant? Moderately enjoyable. You're destroying your chances. I stepped closer. Do I have a chance? She caught my jacket and pulled me in. Barely. I kissed her beneath the flickering hallway light. When she unlocked the door, she held out her hand. This time, neither of us had to ask the other to stay. The following months weren't perfect. We argued when I agreed to a Nashville trip without checking the date of her firm's holiday party. She went quiet when Seattle offered her a short consulting project, then caught herself and told me she wanted to accept it. I apologized. She spoke. We adjusted. No one packed a suitcase in anger. No one mistook fear for an answer. By spring, Westline approved the North Carolina studio. I helped select an old textile building outside Durham, 10 minutes from Sophie's apartment. She designed the courtyard. I accused her of angling one bench incorrectly just to upset me. She said it had character. 9 months after the beach weekend, we moved into a townhouse between Durham and Raleigh. Sophie brought her 2 forks, having finally found the missing one, inside a moving box labeled bathroom. I brought the leaning table from my old apartment. She pretended to hate it. It became the place where we ate breakfast every morning. The next summer, Daniel and Brooke invited everyone back to the same beach house for their first anniversary. On Saturday afternoon, Sophie spread her towel in the sand. She took off her sunglasses, looked directly at me, and smiled. Then she lay face down with her back turned up toward the sun. She swept her hair aside, reached behind herself, and untied the strings of her bikini top. Grant? I held up the sunscreen. You bought lotion on purpose. Maybe. I sat beside her. Put sunscreen on my back, she said, like you used to. The same words, a completely different life. I poured lotion into my hand and rested my palm against her shoulder. Not like I used to, I said. She turned her face toward me. No? Back then, I loved you and kept making you guess. I smoothed the sunscreen carefully across her warm skin. How do you love me now? She asked. Out loud. Her smile softened. After I finished, she retied her top, rolled over, and held up her left hand. The small diamond on her ring finger caught the sunlight. I had proposed 2 weeks earlier at our crooked kitchen table after we'd spent an hour discussing whether we were ready. It hadn't been a surprise. It had been a choice. Sophie pulled me down and kissed me while the surf broke behind us, and our friends cheered from a carefully planned distance. The first time she asked me to put sunscreen on her back, I thought she was asking whether I remembered how to touch her. I eventually understood she was asking something much harder, whether I had learned how to stay. What would you have done if your ex had untied her bikini top and asked you to put sunscreen on her back like you used to? Have you ever experienced something similar, where an old habit reopened feelings you thought were over? Tell me your story in the comments. And for those who'd like to be a little closer to us, we've opened memberships, where you'll get shorter exclusive stories every week with no ads. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.